The night sky over Earth was serene and vast, a seemingly endless expanse of darkness dotted with twinkling stars. The quiet calm was only disturbed by the occasional hum of crickets and the soft rustle of wind through the trees. In a small town nestled in the mountains of Montana, Jack Turner sat on his porch, sipping a cold beer. Life had slowed to a crawl since he left the military. He had grown used to the quiet, the solitude. As Jack leaned back in his worn-out chair, his eyes were drawn to a sudden flash in the sky. At first, he thought it was just another meteor shower, a common sight in the clear, rural night skies. But this light was different, brighter, more intense. It wasn't just one streak of light, but dozens, all converging toward a single point in the heavens. The hairs on the back of Jack's neck stood up. Years of combat had trained him to sense when something was wrong, and this felt very wrong. He set his beer down, eyes locked on the sky as the lights grew larger, closer, until they finally stopped, hovering above Earth like a swarm of angry fireflies. Suddenly, his old flip phone buzzed on the porch table. It was Rick, an old army buddy. "You seeing this, Jack?" Rick's voice crackled through the static. "Yeah," Jack replied, eyes never leaving the sky. "You tell me this is some new Air Force experiment." "No, man. This ain't ours. Turn on the news." Jack rushed inside, grabbing the remote. His ancient TV set flickered to life, revealing chaotic news broadcasts from every major network. Reporters were frantic, stumbling over their words as they relayed footage from cities around the world: New York, London, Tokyo, Sydney, all showing the same thing: enormous, cylindrical ships descending from the skies, blotting out the stars like giant, blackened monoliths. Jack's jaw clenched. He watched as the alien ships positioned themselves over major cities, then waited, silent and ominous, like hunters sizing up their prey. The news anchors struggled to maintain composure, urging viewers to stay indoors and await further instructions. And then, it happened. Every screen, every radio, every device capable of producing sound went dark for a moment before a deep, reverberating voice filled the air. It was emotionless, cold, yet somehow clear in every language on Earth. "Humans of Earth, we are the Orcsians. Your planet is now under our control. Surrender peacefully, and you will not be harmed. Resist, and you will face annihilation." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the world in stunned silence. Jack's TV screen returned to the frantic faces of reporters, but the panic was now even more palpable. The world had just been given an ultimatum by beings from beyond the stars. Jack took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had seen war, had fought against impossible odds, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The Orcsians were unlike any enemy he had ever faced. As he stood there, trying to process what he had just heard, his phone buzzed again. It was a text from Rick. "Head to the old bunker. We might need to dust off the gear." Jack didn't hesitate. He grabbed his go backpack with essentials from his old life that he never truly let go of and rushed out the door. The drive through the winding mountain roads was tense. Jack could see flashes of light in the distance, and the ground occasionally trembled as if reacting to some distant, powerful force. The once peaceful night had turned into a nightmare. He finally reached the bunker, an old Cold War relic hidden deep in the woods. Rick was already there, his face illuminated by the glow of a dozen computer screens. He looked up as Jack entered, his expression grim. "Jack, you're not gonna believe this," Rick said, waving him over to one of the monitors. The screen showed a live satellite feed of Earth. The Orcsian ships were spreading out, deploying smaller crafts that darted toward the surface like swarming wasps. "What the hell are they doing?" Jack asked, leaning in for a closer look. "Not sure, but whatever it is, they're moving fast," Rick replied, typing furiously on his keyboard. "It's like they're setting up a network of something. Blocking our satellites, intercepting our communications, jamming our radars. They're trying to cut us off from each other." Jack felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. They're isolating us. Standard invasion tactic. They want to cripple us before we even know what hit us. Rick nodded grimly. We're already seeing governments start to fold. They're terrified, Jack. This is nothing like we've ever dealt with before. Jack stared at the screen, watching as the alien ships moved with a precision and efficiency that was almost mechanical. It was clear the Ulrexians had done this before. Conquering worlds was their specialty. But this was Earth. This was his world. No, Jack said quietly, his eyes narrowing. Not this time. If they want a fight, we'll give them one. Rick gave him a sidelong glance. You got a plan? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty bleak. Jack turned to his old friend, a fierce determination burning in his eyes. You and I have faced worse odds, Rick. We just need to find their weakness. Every enemy has one. Before Rick could respond, a powerful shockwave rocked the bunker, sending equipment crashing to the floor. The lights flickered, and an ear-splitting roar filled the air as one of the smaller Ulrexian ships hovered above the clearing outside. They found us! Rick shouted, grabbing a rifle from the wall. Jack's instincts kicked in. He grabbed a weapon of his own, adrenaline surging through his veins. The fight had come to them, but this was just the beginning. The Ulrexians had made their first move. And Jack Turner was ready to make them regret it. As he stepped out into the cold night air, facing the blinding lights of the alien craft, he whispered under his breath. Remember, you started this. The Ulrexian craft loomed above the treetops, its dark, angular hull illuminated by a harsh, unnatural light. The roar of its engines sent vibrations through the ground, shaking the old bunker to its foundation. Jack Turner and Rick stood in the clearing, weapons in hand, squinting against the glare. They found us fast, Rick muttered, keeping his rifle trained on the ship. How the hell did they know we were here? Jack's mind raced, but there was no time to analyze their situation. He knew they had mere moments before the Ulrexians deployed ground forces. His instincts screamed at him to move. Fall back to the tree line, Jack barked. We need cover. Without waiting for a response, he sprinted toward the dense forest, Rick hot on his heels. The moment they reached the trees, the ground exploded behind them as the Ulrexian ship unleashed a barrage of plasma fire. Trees shattered, and dirt erupted in all directions. Jack dove behind a fallen log, panting, his heart hammering in his chest. They're not messing around, Rick said, sliding into position beside him. No, they're not, Jack replied, peering through the scope of his rifle. But neither are we. He aimed at the ship's underside, targeting what looked like an exposed power conduit. Jack squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, and the bullet streaked toward its target. A small explosion rippled across the craft's hull, causing it to shudder. Nice shot, Rick said, grinning. But his smile quickly faded as the ship adjusted, turning its weaponry toward them. Before it could fire, a squad of Ulrexian soldiers leapt from the craft, landing with a grace that defied their towering, armored forms. They moved in perfect unison, like living machines, their black eyes scanning the forest. Here they come, Jack muttered. Stick to cover, take them out one by one. The Ulrexians moved swiftly, their armor gleaming under the ship's searchlights. Jack had faced elite human soldiers in his time, but these aliens were on another level, entirely faster, stronger, more precise. He watched as they seamlessly fanned out, their weapons humming with an eerie blue light. But Jack was no stranger to fighting against overwhelming odds. He took a deep breath, steadying his aim, and fired. His shot struck the lead Ulrexian in the neck, piercing a gap in its armor. The alien crumpled, a spray of dark, viscous fluid erupting from the wound. Rick opened fire as well, his rounds bouncing off the soldier's thick plating. Damn it, these guys are tougher than they look. They've got weak points at the joints, Jack shouted back, ducking as a volley of plasma blasts seared past his head. Aim for the gaps. Rick adjusted his aim, focusing on the vulnerable spots. Together, they managed to drop 2 more soldiers before the remaining Ulrexians closed in. One of them raised a palm, and Jack felt a sudden pressure in his skull, as if invisible hands were squeezing his brain. The alien was using some kind of telepathic attack, and it was excruciating. Jack gritted his teeth, trying to shake off the pain. Just as he thought he would black out, a sharp crack echoed through the air. Rick had thrown a flash grenade, the blinding light and deafening noise momentarily stunning the Ulrexians. The mental pressure on Jack's mind disappeared, and he gasped for breath, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Move!" Jack shouted, pulling Rick to his feet. "We need to get out of here before reinforcements show up." They sprinted deeper into the forest, using the darkness and terrain to their advantage. But the Ulrexians were relentless. The thudding of their heavy boots grew louder, their glowing eyes cutting through the shadows like demonic lanterns. As they ran, Jack spotted a narrow ravine up ahead. "This way," he yelled, veering toward it. They scrambled down the rocky slope, slipping and stumbling, until they reached a hidden cave entrance partially concealed by overgrown vegetation. "Inside, quick!" Jack urged, shoving Rick forward. Once inside, they crouched low, panting heavily. The sounds of the Ulrexian pursuit grew fainter, then stopped altogether. It seemed, at least for the moment, they had managed to evade capture. Rick leaned against the cave wall, his face pale in the dim light. "They're like goddamn Terminators, Jack. How the hell are we supposed to fight them?" Jack didn't respond immediately. His mind was still racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The Ulrexians weren't just strong, they were precise, methodical, and equipped with powers that went beyond anything Jack had ever seen. But there was something else that nagged at him, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. The way the aliens had moved, the way they had zeroed in on their location so quickly it was almost like they had known exactly where to find them. "Someone's feeding them intel," Jack finally said, his voice a low growl. "They're not just guessing where we are. They're tracking us." Rick's eyes widened. "Are you saying someone on Earth is working with them?" "Maybe," Jack replied, his jaw clenched. "Or maybe it's something else entirely. But we can't worry about that now. We need to regroup, figure out what they want, and find a way to hit them where it hurts." Rick nodded, his eyes glinting with the old fire that Jack remembered from their days in combat. "So what's the plan, boss?" Jack took a deep breath, his mind already working on the next step. "We need intel. If we can capture one of their soldiers, we might be able to find out what they're after and how to stop them. But first, we need to get to a place where they won't track us so easily." He glanced around the cave, his eyes landing on a half-buried metallic object in the dirt. Curious, he knelt and dug it out. It was an odd-looking device, something he had never seen before. It resembled a thick, rectangular box covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dark. "What the hell is this?" Rick asked, leaning in for a closer look. "No idea," Jack replied, wiping dirt from the surface. As he touched one of the symbols, the device emitted a soft hum and began to glow more brightly. Before either of them could react, a surge of energy shot through Jack's hand, causing him to cry out in shock. The device fell silent, the light fading. But Jack was left reeling, a strange sensation coursing through his body. It was as if something had awakened inside him, a rush of strength, clarity, and something else. Rick's eyes widened. "You okay, man?" Jack shook his head, trying to clear the sudden flood of thoughts and images in his mind. I think this thing did something to me," he muttered, flexing his fingers. He could feel a new awareness, a connection to something beyond himself, like a door had been opened in his mind. Before they could process what had just happened, the sound of distant footsteps echoed through the cave entrance. The Ulrexians were closing in again. Jack stood up, feeling a newfound confidence surging through him. "Rick, whatever that thing did, I think it just leveled the playing field. Rick looked at him with a mix of hope and skepticism. You sure about that? A faint smile tugged at Jack's lips. Only one way to find out. As the shadows of the Ulrexian soldiers appeared at the mouth of the cave, Jack's eyes narrowed. His body felt lighter, faster, stronger. The Ulrexians thought they had trapped two helpless humans. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. With a roar, Jack charged forward, ready to show these invaders that humanity was not going down without a fight. The cave erupted in flashes of blue and white as Jack, now supercharged with the alien device's mysterious power, tore into the advancing Ulrexian soldiers. He moved like a whirlwind, his reflexes amplified beyond human limits. He ducked beneath an alien plasma blast, pivoted on his heel, and drove his fist into the chest of an armored soldier. The impact was so forceful it sent the creature flying back into its comrades, scattering them like bowling pins. Rick, firing from behind a rock formation, watched in disbelief. "What the hell happened to you, Jack?" he shouted over the chaos. Jack didn't answer. He was too focused, too in tune with this newfound energy coursing through him. Every movement felt fluid, precise, almost instinctual, as if he had tapped into a hidden reservoir of power. The Ulrexians, clearly taken aback by Jack's sudden surge in strength, began to retreat. Their black, glossy eyes, once filled with cold certainty, now flickered with confusion and fear. For a moment, it seemed as if they might break and run. "Fall back!" Rick yelled, taking advantage of their hesitation. "We need to regroup and figure out what that device did to you." Jack nodded, adrenaline still pumping through his veins. The two of them bolted deeper into the woods, the eerie glow of the Ulrexian ship fading behind them. As they ran, Jack could feel the energy within him stabilizing, becoming a part of him. Whatever the alien technology had done, it was no temporary boost. It had fundamentally changed him. The night stretched on as they put distance between themselves and the Ulrexian forces. Eventually, they reached an old, abandoned farmhouse that Rick had scouted earlier. It was hidden enough to serve as a temporary safe house. Inside, Rick slumped against the wall, catching his breath. "All right, man, you gotta explain what the hell just happened back there. You were moving like you were one of them." Jack flexed his fingers, still feeling the tingling sensation in his veins. "That device we found, it did something to me. I don't know how, but it's like my senses are on overdrive. I can feel things, hear them before they even happen." Rick shook his head, looking both amazed and worried. "Well, whatever it did, we might have just found the edge we needed. But we can't rely on just you, Jack. We need to find a way to replicate it or dash." Before he could finish, the sound of footsteps echoed from outside. Both men froze, weapons at the ready. But instead of Ulrexians, a familiar face stepped through the creaking doorway, Dr. Elena Vasquez. "Elena?" Jack said, lowering his weapon in disbelief. "How did you find us?" The scientist, her lab coat tattered and her eyes wide with exhaustion, stumbled in. "I've been tracking you since the invasion started," she gasped, her breath coming in short, ragged bursts. "I found out about the Ulrexians' plans. They're not just here to conquer us, they're looking for something specific. Something buried deep beneath the Earth's surface." Jack's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? What could they possibly want from our planet besides resources?" Dr. Vasquez hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor as if searching for the right words. "It's complicated," she began, but before she could explain further, the sound of an engine rumbled in the distance. Jack's enhanced hearing picked up on it first. "They found us," Jack whispered, already moving toward the windows. Sure enough, a convoy of Ulrexian patrol vehicles was approaching fast. The aliens were relentless, their pursuit like a bloodhound chasing a scent. "Damn it, we need to move again," Rick growled, grabbing his gear. But Jack noticed something strange. Elena wasn't panicking. In fact, she seemed almost resigned. "Elena, how did you get here so fast?" Jack asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. How did you know exactly where we were? The scientist's eyes widened, her lips quivering as if she were trying to find the right excuse. But the truth was already written in her eyes. Jack's heart sank as he realized the horrifying reality. You led them here, he said, stepping back. Rick whipped around, aiming his rifle at her. What the hell, Elena? We trusted you. Elena's shoulders slumped, and she let out a shaky breath. I had no choice, she confessed, tears brimming in her eyes. The Orcsians, they took my family. They said if I didn't help them track you, they'd kill them. Jack's fists clenched in fury, but he could see the genuine fear in her eyes. She had been coerced, manipulated. But betrayal was betrayal, and they were running out of time. You don't understand, Elena pleaded, stepping forward. They're not just invaders. They're desperate. They're dying, Jack. The Orcsians have conquered dozens of worlds, but none of them have what they need. They believe Earth is their last chance. And what exactly do they think they'll find here? Jack growled, barely holding back his rage. A power source, she said quietly. Something buried deep beneath the Earth's crust. It's ancient, something they've been tracking for centuries. If they get their hands on it, they'll have the power to reignite their dying sun. Jack exchanged a look with Rick. So, they're here to strip our planet and leave us with nothing. Elena shook her head. No. It's worse than that. If they tap into that power source, it could trigger catastrophic earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. It would tear the planet apart. Outside, the sound of the Orcsian convoy drew closer. Jack knew they were running out of time. We need to move, now, he said. Elena, if you're coming with us, you're going to have to prove you're on our side. I am, she insisted, her eyes filled with desperation. I just needed to buy us time. There's something I stole from them, a blueprint, a weakness in their mothership's defenses. It's our only chance to strike back. Rick scowled. How can we trust you after what you just pulled? Jack's mind raced. The enemy was closing in, and they had no time to debate. We don't have a choice, he said. If she's telling the truth, we might have a shot at taking them down. Reluctantly, Rick lowered his weapon. All right, but if you so much as blink wrong, I'll shoot you myself, he warned. Outside, the Orcsian soldiers were disembarking, their weapons humming to life. Jack glanced at Elena. If you're really on our side, you'd better make this worth it. With that, the three of them bolted out the back door of the farmhouse, racing toward the dense forest. Plasma blasts scorched the air behind them as the Orcsians opened fire. Jack could feel his enhanced senses kicking in again, allowing him to dodge and weave through the chaos with a speed that left Rick and Elena struggling to keep up. As they reached the safety of the trees, Jack paused for a moment to catch his breath. The forest was dark, the moonlight casting eerie shadows on the ground. But his mind was already on their next move. Elena, Jack said, turning to her, if you really have a way to hit their mothership, now's the time to share it. Elena nodded, her hands trembling as she pulled a small data chip from her pocket. This contains the coordinates of a weak point in their shields. If we can get a strike team close enough, we can take out their main power core. Jack took the chip, his mind already racing with plans. All right. But first, we're going to need more firepower and allies. Rick looked at Jack, a grim smile tugging at his lips. Looks like the fight's just getting started, huh? Jack nodded. Yeah. But this time, we're taking the fight to them. Let's show these invaders what happens when you mess with Earth. As the three of them vanished into the darkness, the Orcsians prowling through the forest behind TH. The night was pitch black as Jack, Rick, and Dr. Elena Vasquez moved swiftly through the dense forest, their breath misting in the cold air. The Orcsians were relentless, but the trio had managed to evade capture for hours, weaving through the trees with the skill of seasoned hunters. Now, they had only one destination in mind: the underground bunker where the remnants of Earth's resistance had been gathering in secret. Hidden deep beneath an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of a ruined city, the bunker was the last refuge for humanity's dwindling forces. Jack's enhanced senses picked up the faint hum of electricity as they approached. A steel door slid open with a groan, revealing a dimly lit corridor. "Glad you made it back," said a burly man at the entrance, his face partially hidden behind a gas mask. It was Sergeant Diaz, one of the few soldiers left from the shattered U.S. military. "We've been hearing chatter all night. Thought they got you." "Not yet," Jack replied, clapping Diaz on the shoulder as they moved past. "But we've got information that could turn this around." As they entered the main chamber, dozens of tired, anxious faces turned toward them. Engineers, medics, and soldiers were huddled around makeshift tables cluttered with maps, weapons, and communication gear. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a glimmer of hope in their eyes as they recognized Jack and Rick. Rick didn't waste any time. "Listen up, everyone," he called out, grabbing their attention. "We've got intel straight from the belly of the beast. Dr. Vasquez here managed to steal a blueprint of the Orcsian mothership." Elena stepped forward, the data chip clutched tightly in her hand. "The mothership is their central command. If we take it out, we cripple their entire invasion force. But their shields are nearly impenetrable." "Nearly." She inserted the chip into a projector, and a 3D hologram of the alien ship materialized above the table. The Orcsian mothership was a monstrous behemoth, like a floating city with a jagged, insectoid design. Elena pointed to a section near the ship's base. "This is their weak point," she explained, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was about to propose. "A narrow maintenance tunnel that leads directly to the power core. If we can get a strike team in there, we can detonate the core from the inside." A murmur rippled through the room. It was a suicide mission, and everyone knew it. But Jack's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "We're running out of time," he said, his eyes blazing with determination. "The Orcsians are close to finding whatever they're looking for beneath the Earth's surface. If they succeed, we're done for. This is our one chance to hit them where it hurts." The room fell silent. Finally, Sergeant Diaz stepped forward, a grim smile on his withered face. "I've followed you through hell before, Jack. I'll do it again. You can count me in." One by one, others volunteered: engineers, medics, soldiers. They were tired, outgunned, and outnumbered, but they were ready to risk everything to save their planet. The assault begins under the cover of darkness. The strike team moved swiftly toward the city where the Orcsian mothership was anchored. Using underground tunnels to avoid detection, they emerged just outside the massive, shadowy bulk of the alien craft. The air was thick with tension, the ground trembling under the weight of the alien engines overhead. "Remember the plan," Jack whispered into his radio. "We get in, plant the charges, and get out. We've only got one shot at this." Rick and Elena were beside him, their faces grim but determined. Behind them, a dozen resistance fighters armed with a mix of human and scavenged alien weaponry waited for the signal. Jack nodded to Rick, who fired a grappling hook into the side of the ship. The cable hissed as it pulled tight, and one by one, the team ascended toward the maintenance hatch. Jack's enhanced senses guided him, allowing him to hear the faintest creaks and movements within the ship's hull. The hatch opened with a soft click, and they slipped inside. The interior of the Orcsian mothership was a labyrinth of dark corridors, pulsating with an eerie blue light. The air smelled of ozone and something faintly metallic, like blood. Jack led the way, relying on the blueprint Elena had memorized to navigate the twisting passages. "Two guards around the corner," Jack whispered, his mind almost intuitively sensing their presence. With a swift hand signal, he directed Rick and another soldier to flank them. In seconds, the Orcsians were down, their bodies crumpling silently to the floor. As they approached the core, Elena's face grew pale. The energy levels, they're spiking, she said, checking a small device she had brought. They're preparing to activate something massive. Jack's gut tightened. We need to move faster. But just as they reached the final corridor leading to the power core, alarms blared. The Ulrexians had discovered their presence. The once silent ship erupted in chaos as armored soldiers poured into the corridors. Plasma blasts lit up the darkness, turning the narrow passage into a deadly gauntlet. Keep moving, Jack shouted, using his enhanced reflexes to dodge the incoming fire. He grabbed Elena's arm, pulling her behind cover as Rick and Diaz returned fire. Elena, how much longer? Jack demanded as she worked furiously to override the door to the core. Almost there, she shouted, her fingers dancing over the alien console. The door finally slid open, revealing a massive chamber bathed in a pulsating blue light. At the center was the power core, a swirling vortex of energy contained within an intricate lattice of alien machinery. Rick, Diaz, hold them off, Jack ordered. Elena, plant the charges. The resistance fighters fought desperately at the door, holding back waves of Ulrexian soldiers. Meanwhile, Elena set the charges around the core, her hands trembling with urgency. We've only got 3 minutes before these go off, she warned, stepping back. We need to get out now. As they turned to leave, the doors at the far end of the chamber exploded inward, and General Kurok stepped through, flanked by a squad of elite Ulrexian warriors. His eyes locked onto Jack with a mixture of fury and fascination. So, this is the human who's been causing me so much trouble, Kurok hissed, his voice resonating telepathically in their minds. You think you can stop us? You're nothing more than vermin. Jack stepped forward, the energy from the alien device still pulsing within him. You invaded our world, Kurok. But you made one mistake, you underestimated us. Kurok's eyes glowed, and Jack felt that familiar, crushing pressure in his skull. But this time, he was ready. The energy within him surged, and he pushed back, shattering the telepathic grip with a roar. Kurok's expression twisted in surprise, and Jack took his chance. With a burst of speed, he lunged forward, striking Kurok with a force that sent the alien general sprawling. Now, Elena! Jack shouted. Elena hit the detonator, and the charges around the core began to glow. Alarms blared throughout the ship, the lights flickering wildly as the power core destabilized. Fall back! Jack yelled, grabbing Elena and pulling her toward the exit. Rick and Diaz were already retreating, firing over their shoulders as the Ulrexians tried desperately to stop them. The team raced through the corridors, the ship shaking violently as the core reached critical levels. They barely made it to the exit hatch when a massive explosion tore through the mothership, sending a shockwave that lit up the night sky like a second dawn. The team tumbled to the ground as debris rained around them. For a moment, all was silent. Then, slowly, cheers erupted from the remaining resistance fighters as they watched the Ulrexian mothership begin to collapse in on itself. Jack lay on the ground, breathing heavily, the stars above seeming brighter than ever. Rick stumbled over, helping him to his feet. We did it, man. You actually pulled it off. Jack looked at the burning wreckage, a small smile tugging at his lips. This was just one battle, he said quietly. But it's a start. Elena joined them, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. We've bought ourselves time, but the fight isn't over, she said. There are still Ulrexian forces out there, and they won't stop until they find what they're looking for. Jack nodded. Let them come. We'll be ready. As dawn broke over the horizon, Jack, Rick, and Elena stood side by side, looking out over the scarred but resilient Earth. The Ulrexians had started this war, but now, humanity was fighting back. And this time, they were playing for keeps.